Now then, welcome back to, I was just checking to see if the microphone's on. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for liking and subscribing to the channel in advance. I don't like that, you know. Taryn does that. She thanks the kids for doing the thing before they've done it. And I always feel a bit like it's a bit of an odd thing to do, but anyway, before you like and subscribe the channel, thanks for liking and subscribing the channel. Now, I have been meaning to ask you if you would leave a comment or comments at the bottom of any of the videos and just say what you'd like me to cover, if you'd like me to look at something or you'd like a video on something, because I'm only recording what I think is going to be useful, and that might not be the sort of thing that you want to be useful, if you see what I mean, or the sort of thing that you're interested in. So if you could just send me I'm available. You can send me a message on here, or you can send me a message on Instagram or whatever. I'm with Shedlock 2000 over there. You can send me a direct message there and say, look, I'm kind of interested in this, or I'd like to know how to do that, and can you do a video on it for me, and we'll have a look at it. Now, I have got a couple of things planned coming up. Richard said to me the other day, he said what we ought to do is a winter preparedness thing, because winter's sort of fallen. You probably can't see this. You might see Terran's fresh tyres, winter tyres for a car that have got put on. And of course, I'm going to do a video on putting winter tyres on Danny the Disco here. But Richard said we should do a winter preparedness video, and I think he's right, and I'll explain why. Up here in Canada, weather conditions can be quite rough, really. Just recently, only yesterday, there was a massive storm in BC, and it's washed all the roads away now, and Vancouver's isolated pretty much from the rest of Canada because it's washed all the highways away. Mudslides and water slides and floods and avalanches and all these sorts of things can really affect your plans out here, and you can get stuck. You know, you can have an avalanche behind you, an avalanche in front of you, and you're sort of stuck in the middle. I mean, the middle would be maybe 20 miles or something, maybe 100 miles or something, but you're often stuck. When I used to drive truck, there were accidents in winter, and you'd be parked up for 24 hours because there's only one road in and one road, that's it. And if it's blocked at one end and there's a blockage at the other, of 70 mile of traffic or something, it's hard for the emergency vehicles to get through. Anyway, so Richard said we should do a winter preparedness video, and I think there's two fronts to that. Firstly, I think there's a preparedness video to how to prepare your vehicle so that you're safe in winter, just in case you come across any of those sorts of avalanches or whatever. But there's another one, whereas if you go on to a little bit of off-roading, you're travelling a weekend out and the weather turns, that you're not stuck without the right sort of equipment. These shoulder seasons can be very unpredictable. In fact, Emeka from Driven Hard, excellent video channel, please go and like and subscribe. I'm going to put, now where would I be? It'll be up here. I'll put his channel up here. He went out actually last weekend with some pals and his brother, and the weather turned very poor right at the end at night, and they ended up trying to cross about 1.5 foot of snow, 2 feet of snow. It was so bad that they had to leave the Dodge Ram on the side of the road because it couldn't get out. The Land Rovers made it all out, but the Dodge had to be left there, and well, I think it's still there actually, because they can't get back in to pick it up either. It was a bit of a drama. But one of the issues that affected them was that they weren't quite prepared enough for that sort of dramatic weather change, and Richard and I, with a bit of experience, know about these sorts of things. So we're going to give you a bit of an overall sort of thing about how to prepare both the car and stuff to carry with you if you are thinking about a bit of a trip. Anyway, so that's one video we've got coming on. I'm going to fasten the light bar to the front of the roof rack on the Disco here, and much the same way that I had on the Defender, but this roof rack sits a little lower, so I give quite a bit of thinking about how to overcome that problem, and I've figured out a way, but it's taken a couple of weeks. On the winter front, I've been very busy, as you can see. Danny's loaded up with gear here still, because last night I just finished a fencing job, and I was rushing because we knew weather were dropping, and the weather's changed very, very quickly. I mean, it changed from last night at 3 a.m. it was 12 degrees and I was taking dog out, and now it's about -6. You can't just see. I'll show you some photos, but it's gone it's gone probably Canadian on us here. It's -6 and we've got an inch of snow on ground, and so one of the videos that I was going to show you and I got put together is a heater block. Normally on a Land Rover and many other cars, actually one of the core plugs is a heater. They just take it out and shove this special thing in, and then you plug it into the wall, basically into mains electricity. Well, this Discovery is a bit different than even the Defender was. I mean, you'll recall that the Defender block heater was another story altogether. Paid for it when I bought the thing, and they'd no intention of actually putting it on, and it took quite a lot of effort to make them install it. $1,500 worth of block heater, and it took them quite a long time for me to convince them that I'd paid for it and they had put it in. But anyway, that's another story. On here, on the Discovery, there's an old school sort of system that I actually had on Gen, which was my Range Rover Classic. Actually, curiously enough, I've been offered the Range Rover Classic back, and it needs a lot of restoring now, because the guy that I sold it to sort of left it stood for another 6 years, or her for another 6 years, and so I've been toying with buying her back, but she does need a lot of sort of restoring, because it got broken into and other sorts of things, so much effort would be required in order to make her somewhat nice. So leave a comment, see, you know, if you think I should buy her back. I mean, she's not very expensive, but it'll probably cost a fortune in trying to rebuild her. Anyway, Jen used to have this heater. They used to sell them in the UK, and all sort of a preheat thing, even though the temperatures weren't as aggressive as they are here. There was a little heater block with a little pump in it, and it'd heat the coolant. It sat in the top hose. Or bottom hose, I think. Anyway, it sat in one of the hoses, and it heated a bit of water up, and then it pumped it into the engine, if that makes sense, to try and get some heat into the engine. When it's very, very cold here, and it does get very cold, it gets to -40 and -50 degrees C. In fact, speaking of Jen, a number of years ago, I had to go to Airdrie, pick up a guy that had broken down in the mountains, and went up with Jen, and it was one of the coldest days ever recorded in Canada, and it was -53 on the way up through Calgary and out of Calgary into Airdrie, and then out into Airdrie, and it was that cold that I actually have just up there, I haven't put them in yet, but I've got a pair of insulated overalls that they use out here if you're working outside, so I put those on, and my buddy had a set with him and he put those on, and then we draped some blankets down behind the driver's seats from the hooks there, and then we sort of tied them up with some bungees to try and cram the heat into a smaller space, and then we blocked up, obviously, I mean that was done before, and we blocked up the front of the radiator. Engine temperature were normal, and the heat was coming out of the heater flat out, and it was hot. The problem is that there's just so much heat loss with those temperatures that little bit of heat is insufficient. Now in more modern cars, that's not really much of an issue. The heaters are a bit bigger, aren't they? A bit more capacity and so on and so forth, and heated seats and heated steering wheels and heated front windscreens, all that sort of thing. So it's not a problem, but it does demonstrate how much heat loss in a system can occur when you've got these sorts of temperatures. And these block heaters and these sorts of preheaters, they're necessary here, especially if you have something like a diesel, which needs a little bit more heat to start up. They're necessary because if you leave your car on the side of the road, it doesn't take 3 or 4 hours for all of the car and all of the engine to drop down to -40. And then you start having the problems with the starting. With Jen, this heater was necessary on the top because the fuel, it was a twin SU carburetors. the fuel was fine. It would pump in and it would pump out and it would be squirted out of the needles, but it wouldn't squirt out as a mist. It had sort of condensed because it was that cold, and it had hit the aluminium inlet manifold and it'd just be a liquid. And when it got out there, and it wouldn't start the car, because you need a sort of an atomized sort of spray pattern. So Jen would just never start in that weather unless you plugged it in, and then you end up having blankets over the top and heaters underneath and all that sort of paraphernalia you see up in the diamond mines and that to get your car started. And the diesels are much the same. Nevertheless, this has got this heater block thing that sits in one of the coolant hoses, and when I bought it, it had this, because it must have been built like that, but it's never had the little wire plugged into the front so you can actually plug it in. So anyway, that's another video. That was a long way to say that's another video I've got to do. Additionally, these Discoveries have a problem with their differential. If you've got the rear locking differential, they can get a bit clunky, and for some reason or other that's related to premature oil wear in the back. And so the word on the forums is that you should change the differential oil at about 55 or 60,000 miles, a little earlier if you can, 50,000 miles, but I'll get that one done soon as well. So that's another upcoming video. But today, he says, eventually getting to the point, what I'm going to do is an oil change. I picked this up at 50,500 miles in BC last month, as you know, and then and I'm a little late because I've been trying to get this fencing done before weather turned, but I've now got 56,000 miles on the engine, and so I want to do an oil change, and basically that's the point of this video today. Okay, so here we have the engine cover. When you take this off, you'll see, like all Land Rovers, at least the most recent ones, there are four little rubber affairs here, and these chaps push onto little pimples. I'll show you in a second. Now, I mention this because it's very easy to leave these on or to lose them altogether. When Finn went in for some work at Calgary, they actually lost two of these, and I told them I want them replaced, and they never did. But anyway, so when you take your engine cover off, just have a look to make sure that all four of these in. I've obviously inherited this one, and at some point one's gone missing, so I'm going to have to get a fresh one. Any road. The process here is, these are the bits, look, that they sort of fasten on, and you can see that there's, sometimes you get left in here, but anyway, they're not. It's not on this one. This device here, this little affair here, this is your siphon tube, and it's not immediately apparent from the symbol on the top, and I'll just show you up here. It's not immediately apparent what that says, because it sort of looks more like a recycling, so I suppose you could get it eventually if you wanted to, but I don't like that layer like that, because it does look a bit like the air conditioning things. I mean, I know they have Schrader valves and they're over here, but you sort of don't really sort of expect it to be there. On the other Land Rovers, they're either in the dipstick or they're in here, but anyway, this has got its own thing, so that's that. And then this is obviously your filler port to put your oil in, and then this here is your filter housing, and that's the bit that takes the 32mm socket. So you are going to need a 32mm socket. I don't know why they don't keep them consistent. It is a bit of a nuisance, isn't it, having to buy 5 different bits of tackle, but this is basically it. Now, somebody's put this on too tight. You should be able to put this on pretty much hand tight, and this is not hand tight, as you can see. This is the first time I've ever done this on Danny the Disco, so it's a old new ball game, as you can see, and I am going to have to just change that extension. Can you see that's getting too close to there and it's going to trap my socket? I don't have one of those very nice garages with a bunch of those fancy drawers, you know. I'd like some, really, you know, those little drawers where you can put all your tools. And years ago, when I had my trucking company, I had loads of them, but anyway, I don't now. So this is far too tight. There are a couple of O-rings in here, and you can sort of feel them as you pull this out, but this should be not much more than hand tight, really. So if you're not careful, like I said, you can you can over tighten that, split the housing, and split this bit of a case. This is your, I should point this out, I do ramble, don't I? It was pointed out actually on one of the Australian forums that I ramble a bit too much, and it was said that what did they say? Contains many gems of useful information, but you have to wade through hours and hours of video to find it. So there you are. Anyway, this is your handbrake, your gearbox release cable here, and if you needed to move it out of park and you were stuck somewhere, this is what you'd have to flick, and I'm not going to do it now because it's in park and done it in its thing. So you can manually release the handbrake from inside the cab, and this is your manual transmission release, just in case you don't, you need it to push the vehicle out of the way or whatever. So you can just move this slightly to the side. There is a bit of leeway in it here, and then you can just pull this off, and with it should come the filter, which it does in here. Look, there you go. So that's the old lot in there, and this is the O-ring that I'm talking about, and you should be into replacing these at the same time. I should mention to you, of course, and this is standard practice, but your engine should be at sort of operating temperature first before you drain the oil to make it runny and viscous and all that kind of stuff. And what I've done is I've run the car, got it to temperature, and then, I'm not going to put that on there, and then I have let it to sit a bit so I don't burn myself or scald myself on anything while I'm in here. I should have done this beforehand, but this catcher, I always try and keep that clean before I take the cap off, and I haven't done a very good job of that either. Firth, he's not sorting his sell out, is he? He's giving you lots of advice and guidance, and he's not paying any attention to his rules himself anyway. I usually do this first because it is possible just to, if you catch this, it's possible to flick stuff into the filler plug, and you don't want any of this inside the filler plug, do you? Anyway, that goes on there like that, and in here you can just it's difficult to see from here, and I'll probably show you something on a video, but you've just got a little filter housing for the centre of this to fit on, so this actually fits on a spigot that you can see in there, and you can sort of locate it. Now it takes a bit of getting, this filter takes a bit of getting out of here, I am told, and so we'll look at that in a second. Anyway, so that's the filter out. I'll take those off first, because as you siphon it out, you kind of, like the additional pressure, it's a sort of a sealed system, and so if you try and suck it out with all of this stuff in, you're trying to, it'll create a vacuum, and it'll retard the sucking operation. So once you've attached your pump, you can just basically build up pressure on your I don't know what you call this, sort of a extractor, I think they call it, don't they? Now you can see that as it shakes about a bit, you've got starting to draw air up, and you can sort of hear it. Maybe you can't because I've got my microphone on here, but you can sort of hear the rushing of the fluid, and that's demonstrating that it's pretty much empty. Now the capacity for the TD6 engine is 8 litres, and I'll show you the screen from the iGuide. And I don't know that I've got 8 litres out. We'll just see how much I've got out here. I definitely do not have 8 litres. I don't even have anything close to 8 litres. It's a bit of a worry. That is empty as, I think. I'll just leave that going for a minute. Now, one of the things that these TD6 engines suffer from is a phenomenon called oil dilution. And I'm not fully conversant with the process by which it happens, but I am led to understand that it has something to do with the diesel particulate filter. And so far as I understand it, there must be some diesel drawn out of the fuel supply that somehow helps combust the stuff in your diesel particulate filter when you do those diesel regens. And if it doesn't work, if it's cancelled for one reason or another, then what happens is that diesel goes back with some oil into the engine. It's recycled into the engine, but there's some diesel in the oil, and that over a long period of time obviously can increase, and then you'd end up with more fluid in the sump than you should have. But worse than that, of course, what you end up with is some engine oil and some diesel, and of course that has long-term ramifications for the lubrication of your engine. Now, one of the ways you can tell this, of course, is that the car itself will tell you, and another way that you can tell this is that you'd end up sucking out more oil than you should do, if you see what I mean. So the process of correct diesel particulate filter regeneration is a function of a set travelling on the highway for, I don't know, 20 minutes or whatever it is at a certain RPM and a certain highway speed. And I'm not really, like I said, all this diesel stuff is a little past my experience, really. There's new modern generation of diesel stuff. I cut my teeth on much bigger engines and much older designs, sort of 40-year-old designs maybe. And so regeneration, particulate filters and all that sort of stuff, and DPF is urea content and all that kind of thing is a bit beyond me. But anyway, I'm telling you this because if you suddenly end up drawing 9 litres out or something like that and you're wondering why you've got too much, well, that's the reason. And you should probably be trying to attempt to take it on the highway a bit more often. Anyway, we'll give it one more shot with this. See if we can pull any more out. And I think we can't. I think we are definitely done there. And that is all she wrote. Now this has cooled down a bit. You can see how stuck this filter is in here, and apparently they are quite, there's a bit of it, you can just see them in the bottom, there's a bit of an affair to hold that filter in place. And so we will try using a special tool to remove it. The filter you need is this LR013148, and this is allegedly the correct filter. It will come with a new O-ring to sit on the housing, and I always replace both while I'm at it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reach in with my pliers and see if I can't pull it out, and there we go. Now you are going to damage the filter when you do this, so before you yank it out, please do make sure that you have got the correct replacement, which is why I check the box first. Now you can see here's the rubber O-ring, and you can check to see if there's any damage on this O-ring by sort of running your fingers around it, but I've got to take it out anyway. I always put a fresh one in, and so I'll just get me special pocket tool out, and then with the knife just slip your knife blade underneath it. Try and pull on the upside just in case you damage the other one on the way in and you need to replace it with the existing one rather than the fresh one. A little bit of oil just adds a shine to the plastic. Now with this fresh O-ring seal, you can see there's no rubber on it at all, no oil on it at all, so you probably shouldn't do this without gloves on, but my hands are long past getting worried about that sort of stuff, virtue of the life I've had. So just pop it in between your fingers. If you've got some gloves on, that'd be better. Just run a little bit of oil so it runs all the way over. While you're running it over with your fingers, you can feel if there's any knocks or little cuts or niggles out of the O-ring, and that is your sort of sign that the new O-ring or even the O-ring might be damaged. There are several similar sort of grooves, and these ones have got little notches in them, so make sure that they don't sit in that, and try not to sort of catch it on these fairly sharp bits which might put a nick in the O-ring. When you've got it on, just run it around with your fingers again to seat the O-ring, just to make sure that it's nice, and then you can replace the old filter with the new filter. Here's your genuine Land Rover filter number, LR013148, and I always like to use genuine Land Rover filters. I am absolutely certain that they are not the best filter, but they do reduce any of the drama when and if you come to a warranty, because of course they'll pull out your filter, it'll say Land Rover on it, and then all of your warranty concerns go out because they know you've been putting it in with what they recommend. Now, having said that, I am going to just talk to you very briefly. He says popping this back in here. I am going to talk to you very briefly about engine oil. I have to confess to not being an engine oil expert, but I have been, I don't like that, but I have been told by some colleagues of mine, nope, I don't like that at all. I will commence that particular discussion when I've been successful in getting this on here. That's better. Now, I've been told by a good friend of mine, well I say a good friend, a friend of mine in England, his name's Cameron, and Cameron has always very interesting page and a very interesting person anyway. He ran a charity event that was a bit more, did you see that? That was a bit more tightening than I'd prefer to give it really, but it was just a little nip with the handle. You should have been able to run that down with your hand, but for whatever reason it was a bit tight, which may explain why it was a bit tight coming off. But anyway, don't over tighten that so that you don't have the difficulty I had when you come to take it off next time. Going back to Cameron, so Cameron did a charity event where he drove across an African country, I believe, or a province or some such thing. I don't actually know the story terribly well. And he did this to raise some awareness as well as some money. And it's a very excellent website which I'll pop up onto the YouTube thing here, and you can have a look at it yourself. But Cameron has offered some advice on engine oils, and I'll explain the story. So this engine, this TD6 engine, isn't actually a Land Rover engine. I mean, it is a Land Rover, it comes from Land Rover obviously, but it was part of the development when Ford owned Land Rover, and obviously, as you can imagine, Ford put most of their stuff into the plant, and they had the plant in Dagenham that produced engines, and so for quite some time Land Rover ended up with Ford designed engines, and this is one of them. This is essentially a 3 litre power stroke engine, and they're known as Lion engines. This is a 3 litre V6 Lion engine, and it replaced the 2.7 litre that preceded it, that we saw fitted in the LR3s in the UK. And Ford have a specific oil requirement for their Power Stroke. I mean, their 3-litre Power Stroke, and Land Rover have their particular requirements, and their requirements are a 0 or 5 W20s Castrol GTX Edge Professional. And that particular oil is quite expensive and somewhat difficult to come by. In fact, in America, North America, you can only get it at main dealerships. And I do have it here. I bought some to do this oil change with. But just before I did this oil change, I was telling Cameron that this was the plan. And he offered me some sage advice, and I don't know enough about engine oils to sort of criticize what he said. So I have done some research, and I've done some reading around, and generally speaking, most people on the forums tend to prefer sticking with the Ford spec than the Land Rover spec. Can't just tell you why that would be, but that does seem to be the way that people go. Cameron's advice is that the oil specifications for this engine from Land Rover are insufficient and they don't meet Ford's requirements. And I don't really understand oil specifications, but what I can say is that I would probably agree that the most highest specification engine oil is probably the best specification engine oil. Now, Mobil I and Motorcraft, which is Ford's oil, and they fit that themselves, they specify a 0 W40s to meet WSS. I'm going to see if I can remember this off the top of my head, but it might not be right. WSS M2C171-F1. And that particular specification is met by the oil that I'm going to use, which is Mobil I. It's also met by Shell and well, a number of others. There's some Royal Purple that meets those specifications and so on and so forth. But one of the things that doesn't meet those specifications is the Castrol Edge Professional. The quality of the oil is the same with the 020s, and that in some respects I think the specifications of the oil itself, in terms of additives or phosphorus contents and all that kind of stuff, phosphor contents, I'm sure that's correct, but the weight is very different. So Land Rover's weight is a 020, 0W20 or 5W20, and for cold or severe climate operation, Ford recommend a 0W40 weight oil, and that's what I'm going to use in here, 0W40s. Now, as I said, I have bought it in that thing, 8 litres of Jaguar Land Rover Edge Professional 0W20s, but what I'm going to actually use is the Mobil I Delvac one. Now I don't have any preference for Mobil I. It's actually not my preference. I prefer a Castrol product, but I can't find Castrol 040 to meet this specification. It's not available in Canadian Tire. That doesn't mean that it's not available in Canada. It just means that I can't find it here. I'll have to do some more research. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that it meets a bunch of different requirements, and it lists here the Caterpillar and Cummins and Mack and Volvo, because they've branded this at Canadian Tire as a big truck diesel engine oil. But what I'll do is I'll screenshot Mobil I, the website, and it does specify that this engine oil also meets WSS M2C171-F1, which is the requirements from Ford, and I'll flash that up here. So that's what I'm going to fit. Now, very unhelpfully, this container contains 3.78 litres, which is, frankly, unhelpful in terms of needing 8 litres. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to punch this and pour it in, and away we go. Now, the one thing I didn't prepare is my extremely ancient filter. When you move countries and you had a lot of tackle in one country, remember I used to have a logistics company and some other things, And I had a lot of equipment that I gave away or left or whatever. And when you move countries, you do acquire random bits of things because you're sort of starting again. And so I acquired that funnel, and I've no idea where I acquired it from, and it's the bentest bit of old tin thing that you've ever want to see. But to be honest, it's a cracking little funnel. I like it very much, and I've had it probably, well, I've had it I think as long as I've been here, which must be 15 or 16 years now. But in fact, I might have got it while I was trucking. I might have found it in a truck or something. But here we go. So this is 3.78 litres of Mobil, whatever it's called, Mobil, what is it? Delvac 1. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a Mobil 1 groupie. And I would have preferred to have stuck with a Castrol product because I do have a sort of affinity for Castrol or Fuchs. Years and years ago, when I was but a Wayne, I actually did a college degree in what you would call a college degree here in North America. I suppose it was college there, but I did a couple of college courses, and I did some work experience, and they sent you away to a place and you had a bit of a choice. I'm just going to pop this on before I forget it. I did a work experience at the local quarry, a place called Tunstead Quarry in Derbyshire, near Buxton. And Tunstead Quarry is a very big quarry, and they've got a big shop there. And of course they did their own servicing for all the Finnings cat equipment that they got on site. And they used to use an engine oil called by Fuchs, and it was called the Ashford, that's the brand, or not brand, but that was the sort of product's name, Ashford oil. And it was a very, very nice oil. It wasn't synthetic at all. Just like the old sort of oils, but it felt really nice on the fingers. You know, you could tell that it had some nice qualities and properties to it, and I sort of got into Fuchs at the time, and I still like Fuchs oils, but you can't get it here anyway. So I have no affinity for Mobil 1, but I have done a fairly considerable amount of research on oils, and when I came to it, the story is very roughly that Shell, Rotilla, T6 I think it is, and the Mobil 1 are equivalent oils meeting or exceeding the specifications required by Ford, and the general consensus of opinion is that it's slightly better than the Motorcraft oil, which is Ford's, and Castrol didn't appear on the radar because other than the oil from Land Rover, it doesn't meet specification. It's not heavy enough weight for extreme service, and so it basically boils down to Mobil 1 versus Shell, although I'm certain that there's a Fuchs equivalent. I should tell you at this point, he says, rambling on, that European oil grades are not synonymous with North American oil grades. And so many of you from the UK will be looking at me as if to say, well, what are you on about? And to be frank, I'm sorry, but I can't cross relate because I don't actually know what makes the specifications what they are. Cameron is your man for that, so if you've got any questions for Cameron, you can find him on Instagram, or I'm sure that he's going to pop his head up in the comments here, and maybe you can ask him a few questions. But I don't know how the crossover works between American oil and the European standards that we have in Europe. So my recommendations may not be useful for those of you that live in England or Europe. And if you are watching from Russia, and I do have a lot of you that do log in from there, Italy and Spain, France, Germany, Britain, Portugal and Spain, many countries in many countries in Europe. If you do have questions on oil, I would recommend either asking Cameron, popping onto one of the YouTube forums, popping onto one of the Facebook forums, trying to find an equivalent to Mobil 1. And if all else fails, I would try and find a crossover on the internet between Ford's recommended oil in Europe and Ford's recommended oil here for their 3 litre Power Stroke. I'm relatively certain it'll be easy to find. And I do absolutely know that Fuchs make an oil suitable for this, because Cameron has mentioned what it is, but can't just tell you because I've forgotten. Anyway, there you go. That's what I've got to say about that. Now this next bit is a bit more complicated because, not surprisingly, 3.78 plus 3.78 is not a figure that rolls easily off the tongue, is it? half a litre, give or take. How do you do half a litre out of a thing that contains way too much? What I should have is a little measuring jug, shouldn't I? Should be far more organised than this, Firthy. Now there is a bit of a, as you can see, there's a bit of a measuring device on the back here, and I'm assuming this is 1, 2, 3 and then 0.7. So I would say if we're just a bit above that, we've probably nailed it. It's not half a litre. I must be getting close there. Yeah. Check this. No dipstick, you see, on these, which is a bit of a nuisance because the dipsticks are electronic, as they are on many of the new ones. And so I'm just going to start it up because it'll take about 5 or 7 minutes to reset. Dribble in. So I'll just make sure that everything's good. You can stick your fingers down here, well actually your thumb, just make sure that that filter housing's driven home, and then make sure that's on and your suction siphon tube is. I'm going to suggest that what you do when you've got all this engine cover off is just have a look around the engine for anything that rubs. This is something that people don't tend to do these days. They might change their oil, but they may or may not miss a fairly obvious sort of an issue with their engine because they're actually not checking for anything. So when I have my engine cover off, or pretty much any time I change the screen wash or any of that kind of stuff, I always have a look just to make sure that things like this clip aren't rubbing. Often you can find hoses rub through because the clips have failed at some stage or other, and the pipes are actually rubbing on themselves. So always look at the pipes. Of course you need to look at your belt to make sure that your belt isn't cracked. It's a bit hard to show you down here because this isn't the best camera to do this on, mostly because it's on a gimbal and it's hard to shove in the oil basically. But check your belts. You should check these hoses. Now I have mentioned to you at the beginning of this video that there's a sort of a heater affair, and I'm going to show you where that is if you can see it. And it's a bit hard to see because it's right down there, but right at the bottom there, I can't just put this anywhere that, will you stay there if I just put you there? So this affair here, this block you can just see, that's the bit that needs to be heated up, and the wiring goes to, you stay there. wiring comes off of this wiring, capped wiring harness here. So when you take this off, there's a plug and you screw it on, then you feed the wire out the front, but I'll do that at some other stage. Now while you're under here, you can have a look at the axle that you can see just under there. Have a look at your alternator to make sure that all the wires and plugs are connected, make sure that there's nothing sort of hanging off, and you've got your plugs are all nicely connected and they're not being bashed by the bonnet, that your air pipes and all of that kind of stuff are not chafing on anything. Look at the quality of your hoses, make sure the hose clamps aren't leaking. I always try and check while I'm here for fluid leaks, especially from your water pump, which you would see as a red mark underneath. That's just dirt and a little bit of stuff there on the electronic steering. I have noticed that that wiring harness is open there, and I don't know whether that's how that's meant to be or whether there's meant to be a cap on it. It looks a bit odd to me. It looks like there should have been a cap on it, but I'll have a look at that and ask my dealership whether that's a standard thing. Anyway, that's just the sort of thing that I would suggest that you do while you're sort of waiting for the gauge to show up. Okay, I've given it another 5 minutes. It's now been 15 minutes, pretty much spot on. So we're going to go through the cycle again. I've closed the bonnet. I don't know whether that made any difference, but I was just tidying up outside and I thought I'd just close the bonnet. So we'll go through the menus again. And here we are. And we'll go down to oil level. And there we go. So looking at this, I need just a little bit more because I'm on the I don't know how much that would be really, but one little separation. So and then that's it. Now while I'm here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the process of clearing the service. So the reminder, the service reminder. So we'll switch the car off, switch on the car, and then you've got to pop the bonnet. Put your foot on the brake and the pedal. Service resetting. Press OK to clear. Service counter reset. Then take your foot off and then close the bonnet. Switch the ignition off. When we switch that on again, and we go through now, when we go to service, we are good for 10,900 kilometres. 11,000 kilometres, don't know what that is in miles. But I change mine every 5,000 miles, so there you go. I have dropped in another 100 millilitres. I did measure how much I pulled out of it, and for some reason or other I only pulled out 7 1/4 litres of oil, which is enough that the oil wasn't low. I mean, it would have been still it would have been still on the mark and still above middle, I would say. I think it's 1.5 litre is the difference between empty and full. So it would have just been about half, but it does make me start to want to just keep my eye on that oil level, because after 5,000 miles, assuming they filled it up to the right level, which they may or may not have done where I bought it, we should just see how much there is in it. Note to myself, I should have really checked it before now, so that's kind of something to bear in mind. I haven't ever had a Land Rover that's burned oil, or lost it for that matter, out of the engine. No, I'll be careful about that. Once, about 28 years ago, I had a Series 3 diesel which lost a bit of engine oil, and that was the only one I've ever had. So I've never burned it, and I'm a bit lax really at checking my engine oils, because I've never had one that's either lost it or burned it. So Note to self, be more, be better, I suppose. Anyway, thank you very much for tuning in. I do hope you find this video useful. Again, like I said, please like and subscribe the video, as Emeka says, to feed the algorithm. It's very nice having you on board. Please feel free to ask any questions and I'll do my best to answer them. See you next time. Cheerio.